Welcome back to Undulations. So this is my third and final video in the series that I've called Kastle DNA. And just to review a little, in the first video, I showed you how that we could use a binary code to more or less accurately describe the patch on a Kastle mini synth. And so that's the wiring and the knob settings. And then at the end of that video, I showed you how that we could use a little bit of randomization coming from coin tosses to come up with a random patch. We listened to that, and then in the second video I showed you that it was easier to use the computer to generate random patches, and using the processing integrated development environment, I showed you that I could also generate a picture of what the patch should look like, and that greatly speeds up the ability to generate a bunch of random patches and set them up on the Kastle very quickly. Now, in this video, what I want to walk you through is what I've been doing for quite a while now, which is not just doing random patches, but selecting patches out of the random patches that I feel like sound better or more interesting, and then a way that using the software I can combine those and basically make a hybrid, possibly come up with something that's better than what I had to start with. And so it's a way through successive generations to try to come up with patches that maybe you've never thought of. And I want to say up front, what I show you in terms of the software tools I'm using, they're not exactly efficient. I'm doing a lot of cutting and pasting of codes, and that is patch codes, and moving files around and stuff like that. But there really wasn't any reason to streamline the process, because I'm still having to set up the patches on the Kastle by hand, turn all the knobs as accurately as I can, and so that's sort of the rate limiting step on this. And I did a lot of it, but it's not the type of thing that you would normally do in a genetic algorithm scheme, where that you would have something run for tens, hundreds, thousands, and more generations to try and develop some sort of refined product or example of what you're working on. So I did 4 or 5 generations, and I think you can see some change over time. But really what I want to focus on is what I've gotten out of the whole process of doing this, which is learned a lot more about the Kastle, and I want to be able to share some of the details of that with you. But to start with, I think I'm just going to walk you through some of the software tools, and we'll just sort of do a little mini genetic algorithm piece here and see what the outcome is. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so I've got 3 software tools made in processing on my computer desktop right now. And the one on the left is Kastle Codes Generator. The one in the middle is Kastle Codes Crosser. And the one at the end is Kastle Codes Reader. And so I'm just going to walk through how I used these things in the process of making this video. And I should also say that I have given this code to a couple of people already, and that anybody that's interested in this is welcome to DM me on Instagram, and we will find a way to get the code to you. Now, to start with, what I'm going to do is very similar to what I did in the previous video. I'm going to hit run on the Kastle Codes Generator, and that's going to make a patch. And you know, it actually looks like a pretty plausible one, so we'll just close that for now. And I just want to show you what that made. Okay, it made a PNG file, so that's the image that we just looked at. But new thing in this version, it also made a text file that when I click on that, it shows this binary code. So that is just the patch code in 1s and 0s, which is the same as what we've been seeing in the sort of QR code looking version of this. Okay, so Now, next thing, I'm going to make a few more of these random patches just by pushing the run on the generator. So there's that, and that one probably won't do much, but we'll just give it a go. And one more, and do one more. All right, so now if we look down here, it says 9 items. One of those is the actual code, and so that's going to be 4 of the images and 4 of the text files. And so what I'm going to do right now is build these 4 patches, and we'll decide which ones we like. An important thing to point out at this stage is that these code numbers for the patches, they're just a random code assigned to each patch, 9 digits, that helps me sort of label and keep track of things. So I'm going to click on this patch 787. I'll just go by the 3 first digits, and we'll take a look at that, and let's go ahead and build it. So we don't have to do plus into the plus, but that Timbre mod with the and stepped is good. I'll probably just fast forward through some of this. I'm a little cramped here for the filming of this, but it is fine. And then this, and this. So that's our first random patch all set up, and all I'm going to do is just turn it on. I know that if I turn the LFO rate down, that it'll probably be a little bit more pleasant. Okay, so that one was pretty cool. That was 787, so the first one. And then now I'm just going to flip through these PNG files, image files, and we'll do the next one. All right, so this is 305. Okay, so this is set up pretty close, and I'm just going to turn it on. We'll see what we get for 305. So that's kind of a tone with a complex timbre. And I did some tweaking after the fact here, and that doesn't change anything about the original code, whether I like it or don't like it. I try to just always explore a little bit though. So I'm going to turn that off, and we'll do a couple more. All right, and so for 208, it sounds like nothing. So that one probably won't be a favorite. All right, we're going to move on from that, turn it off, zero everything, and then do the last of our 4 random patches, which the last one is 697. And it's real simple. We're not going to hook IO left to IO right, but I will just for the sake of it put Timbre mod to bit in, and we'll just see what the settings sound like. That's basically all this is. And I had one empty patch out of all of the random ones that I did, and I kind of thought about the statistics, and for what I was doing, it kind of made sense that I would get that one time where there was just no wires whatsoever. Okay, and here we go. This one sounds like this. Okay, so basically just a tone, and so let's say that our favorite two are number 787, which looked like that, and number 305, which looked like that. And now I'm going to show you what it's like to try and make a hybrid out of those two patches. So to do that, I'm going to grab 787 and move it over here to the crosser apps folder, and then I'm going to grab 305 and move it over here to the same folder, so they're both in there. And I want to use these patch code IDs, so I'm going to copy that and paste that up into the code here, and then copy that one and paste that into here. And I had a little bit more streamlined method for doing this sort of thing for the bulk tournament that I did of patches, but this is easier in terms of showing you guys. So now what I'm going to do is run this crosser using 787 and 305 as the source patch codes, and when I run it, gives me a couple of things. It shows me 787 and 305 are part of the source, but then it generates these new codes, 245 and 521, and you'll see down here in the folder 245 is in there. I'll click on that. That's what it looks like. And here's 521. Now, what does this mean? It means that this P number tells you what is going on. It says that I took the first 17 digits of one of the codes and hooked it to the rest of sort of the back part of a code. So I took the front of one and hooked it to the back of the other, where the division between them was at bit number 17. And then I did the opposite with the back and the front, so you sort of mix and match. And then these mutation flags, there's a 15% chance that a bit just sort of gets flipped, okay? And that tries to sort of throw a little bit of randomness into the whole process, even if you aren't using random patches anymore. Okay, so then what I'm going to be able to do now is take these two new patches that are the hybrids, 245 and 521, and I'm going to be able to use the reader tool that I have. So let me grab the code for 245, copy that, paste it up here, and run that, and this will make an image of our new patch. All right, so we've got that. And then we're gonna next cut and paste the code for the other one that we selected. So that's the 521. And I'm gonna paste that up here into the reader. So it's just reading that code and generating a picture from it. So run that, and you'll see that it gives the code over here and the right number, and doesn't look like it's doing much. That patching looks like maybe the other one did a little bit better. Now we're just going to go through patching those. So let me click on the image, and so here's 245. In fact, why don't we do 521 first, which looks like this, just to sort of get that one out of the way, because I don't really have a lot of hope for it. That I don't think it's high enough to get audio LFO into the second oscillator, but it might be. So let's just give it a listen. Okay, so just the tone. So now the final thing to do here is take a look at what I think is going to be the most promising of the hybrids. Okay, I think that's pretty accurate. Let's just hear what it sounds like. All right, so nothing too great coming out of that, but I just wanted to show the process, and that kind of explains why I started with 128 random patches. I divided that up into pods of 16, so I had 8 pods of 16, and then within a pod I picked 4 what I thought of as the winner patches out of those 16, and then randomly selected pairs of those to make hybrids with, and ended up making 8 hybrids per pod. And so that just basically sort of cuts the number of patches that I have after the initial 128 random patches, cuts it in half down to 64, 32, 16, and then finally I was left with 8 patches. And so one thing that happened along the way as I went through these different generations is I kind of liked hearing the Kastle behave in ways that I didn't normally think of it as behaving. I normally think of it as, you know, noisy, drony, all kinds of stuff like that, but I started to get these very video game-like sounds out of it, and so I think that kind of around maybe generation 3 started to take over what I thought was sort of a winner in the patch selection process. And so the last group, they have a lot of sounds that sound kind of like old, you know, sort of Pac-Man era type video game sounds. Okay, so here are the sounds from the very first 8 random patches, and I just figured I'd pick that because it's at the beginning. And one thing of note is that this very first patch is basically silent, and there's a thing where when the Kastle's oscillator out is basically grounded to the minus, that it pretty much mutes a patch. And so I left it in this very first pod of 16, but I started sort of weeding that one out. And so this is a good time to point out that I removed things that connected plus to minus, and then eventually, starting the second pod, removed this oscillator out to minus thing because it just didn't make any sound. And other than that, I pretty much let anything be whatever it wanted to be. And then in terms of the pairings for the hybrids, I just tried to make sure that I would do 4 random pairings of the 4 winner patches for a pod, and I just tried to make sure that in those 4 pairings that all of the patches were represented at least once. So those are sort of my guidelines, but other than that, not much else. So yeah, the first one is silent, and then this next one, just sort of a scrabbly noise. This is kind of a cool, deeper, lower noise. And then this one, I call this sort of a noisy Morse code, or Morse code noise. Pretty likable. Another silent one. And then this, just a dial tone. Alarm sound. That's pretty cool. Okay, so, and this is of course highly edited. I was having to set things up, and I'd hit pause and record and that sort of thing, but those are the original sounds of just flipping the switch and hearing what it did. Okay, so now let's take a look at the last 8 patches. This is from the 15th pod and the 4th generation of hybrids. And basically, you can already tell that the traces are quite a bit more complex on here. And I'll just go ahead and start it off. So this one's got some complex timbral changes. It's not particularly musical, but there's a lot going on with it. And it changes over a long time period. one has another long-term change that's kind of subtle. Just a pretty classic video game sound. I let this one run because it's one of the best examples I had of the slow changes in rate. This one has some of the best melody of any of them. This one would have been a lot better with a slower LFO, but it's got kind of a nice gallop to it. Crisp sound. Nice low part to that. And again, another classic video game sound. And then the last thing I want to do is give a few of the patches that I encountered along the way that I really liked a lot. Have those in a different file. The first one is sort of just a nice drone sound, and it almost sounds like there's reverb or a little bit of delay on it, but it's just pure Kastle drone sound. Here we go. And that's the sort of thing that the beat frequencies on it, it's a very subtle thing about setting stuff up. So that was why I really wanted to do it, where I just flip the switch and listen. And that one worked out a way that I liked. We'll go with the next one. I just like the complexity of this one. A lot of different types of sound in there. And now this last one is in two parts. The first part is just as patched, comes through as a very rapid kind of melodic thing, but I slowed it down, pitched it down, and you'll hear bass line and you'll hear drums. That's clicks from the LFO coming out the I/O port. And then also some melodic parts. I'm changing, I think, the timbre and the wave shape. So let's give it a listen. So that's as patched. Then I changed the patch for a little to get this. You might need headphones for the drums. Okay, so that's it for the examples of what I've done through this process, but now what I want to do is more of a tutorial sort of thing. Let's talk about a few of the things that I've learned that are actually useful if you patch the Kastle. All right, so I just mentioned using the LFO out the I.O. for sort of a clicky drum percussion sound. One question would be, how would you normally make a percussion sound? And sort of the classic way to do that on the Kastle is if you have the triangle LFO going into the wave shape, and let me turn some things up. Okay, and then what you need to do is sort of like get half of that triangle by running the square LFO into the LFO reset. And so then that sounds like this. And so that's got a pretty nice snap to it there like that. But in the course of my explorations, I found something that was different that I didn't know about. And so to make that happen, I'm going to go from the plus to the mode, and we're in track and hold as the main oscillation mode. And if I turn that on, what you'll find is kind of typical sound. But if you turn the timbre way down, you can hear that there's a percussiveness to that that isn't keyed to the LFO rate, it's keyed to the timbre frequency, which can go very low. Quite low. All right, so I'm going to turn it up a little faster. And then I'm going to raise the pitch. And this only works with the wave shape all the way maxed in track and hold mode, because you start to get sort of too much tonal quality there. Okay, and you can have it higher, sort of a bongo type hit, or lower, fast, slow. And you know, maybe nobody uses the Kastle for drums, but I think it's always an interesting option, because what this enables is that you can, by changing the timbre with a different LFO, say the step LFO, you can get drum variations. And I can add another wire to get pitch variations too. So this is triangle to the pitch modulation. So just wanted to share that. Maybe somebody can use it for something. Okay, so this next thing isn't so much a tip really as just a patch that I really like that came out of all of this. I'm going to go back into the track and hold mode, so that's plus into the mode setting. And then the key thing on this is going from the second oscillator to the LFO reset. So that's letting the timbre be sort of a control on the LFO tempo. And then next thing is going to be going from LFO step into the pitch modulation. So that's what's going to give us our melodic part. And then I find that I get kind of burned out on the step to LFO if I don't put plus into the bit in, which makes it randomized. So to do that, I'm having to sort of chain the plus from the mode to the bit in. Then I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. So what you get out of this is a combination of the LFO rate and the second oscillator rate, giving just a lot of different effects, and the pitch modulation is giving a FM component to it. You can change the wave shape a little bit, but I kind of like it right there near the middle. And this sort of unstable stuff, I won't do it right now, but it sounds really nice with some reverb. Okay, so now for this last one, this one is really different, and I don't have an explanation for it. One thing that comes up when you do something like this is that you look for inconsistencies in the technology. Like, is there a way to glitch it? Is there anything that is different? And gotta say that the Kastle is an extremely robust system that I finally, in the course of all of this, found one thing that seemed so strange to me that I really want to share it. And if anybody has any theories on it, please let me know. But to start with, I've got the settings just as so, and then I've got the square LFO going into the pitch, and the triangle LFO going into the pitch as well, pitch mod, and that just sounds like this. Now it's real subtle because I've got the LFO all the way down. So not much to that, but the thing that is strange to me is that I figured out that if you put a wire from the second oscillator, and we're in the normal startup mode of the Kastle, no changes to the mode, and you go to the bit in. Now that has to do with the stepped part of the LFO, but somehow this apparently sends a signal from the second oscillator into the bit in a way that somehow changes the character of the LFO. So you'll see what I'm talking about when I turn it on. So now instead of, I didn't change the rise and fall patch that we had, which is just from the stepped and the triangle going into pitch modulation, but this is giving these real rapid pulses. I assume it's from some signal, as I said, coming out of the second oscillator. So that's cool in itself, but then I had the thought of, well, maybe somehow that there's a way to make it feedback or kind of like lock. And so by going from square LFO, turns out that you can make that happen. So from square LFO back into the bit in, and bear in mind with those rapid clicks, I still had the LFO all the way down, so it was a very slow LFO, but the timbre somehow taking control of the LFO, not through the LFO reset, but through the bit in, which again doesn't make sense to me that the stepped would control not just the stepped, but the entire LFO's rate. So I'm going to turn this on, and I hope I can get it to do what it has been doing, which is that it does that sort of chirping at first, and then it locks into more of a rapid tone type behavior. So you can learn a lot by looking at the LFO light in this case. All right. And that time that it stays sort of in that bubbly mode depends a lot on the other settings. So I'll play with it a little and see if I can get something that lasts a little bit longer. So that's about the longest I could get it to go. I'll try that one more time just so we can see. Well, it didn't work that time. It's pretty long. So anyway, I don't know what application that has musically, but as a device that seems so just abstractly perfect, where everything seems to behave exactly the way that it's supposed to, define one weird thing in it has been really interesting. So I hope that somebody might have an explanation or even better, a use for it. So let's wrap this video up. All right, so that's it for the Kastle DNA, and it has been a lot of stuff about the Kastle. Hope you've gotten something out of these videos, either about genetic algorithms or modular synthesis or the Kastle itself. I feel like that last little thing that we did, that's kind of the best case scenario on something like this, where that you find a little nook or cranny of the parameter space of the device that it's not something that would make sense to do just based on what you know about the device, but by sort of randomizing or using an algorithm, you can come up with new things that way. So it's been fun. And I think to close this video out, I'm gonna show something that I did along the way in this work, which was hooking the Korg SQ1, which is a sequencer, to the Kastle, and turned out pretty nice. So take a look at that. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you soon in the next video.